Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Tuesday evening. And if you're eagle-eyed as you watch this podcast, if you were watching it on ESPN2 or on YouTube, you'll see me and us in multiple different outfits because this podcast, for various reasons, was recorded at different times on different days. But we hope this is going to be the last time we record it. Joining me from New York City down the road is Tim Bontemps.
This is one of those magical days where we do whole segments of the podcast, and stuff is good. We have good pods, and then we have to just completely redo it because events change as the day goes on.
It happens. Bontemps will be covering the draft on Wednesday night.
I will be.
I know from earlier that's his 13th career draft.
Something like that. It's in New York every year, so I'm always at it. I don't know how many years it's been. It's been enough. As Joining people in the NBA, we're calling it Sunday night. It is Game 8 of the finals.
That's about right.
Yeah.
Joining us from Dallas, Texas, back home where he's going to be going to the Mavericks drafting of Cooper Flagg on Wednesday night, is Ben McMahon.
Howdy, partners. I think that the Bontemps 13th draft is about all we'll keep from the stuff that we recorded earlier in the
day. Please do. Please.
It was good. It was good practice for us, though. We haven't done enough podcasting lately.
Yes, we don't pod enough.
Please hope none of that sees the light of day. All right. We're going to talk about something the Mavericks did a little later. They had some business they got done tonight with Kyrie Irving. But first, let's talk about the Boston Celtics, Bontemps. They made 2 trades in the last 24 hours, sending off 2 of their core pieces from their 2024 championship run in salary dump maneuvers. 2 very different trades, although they both accomplished salary relief, sending Drew Holiday to the Portland Trailblazers and sending Kristaps Porzingis to the Atlanta Falcons. Before we talk about
what's he doing? Is he tight end? Is he playing wide receiver?
He would be an incredible wide receiver because, you throw those fade routes to the corner, you're not defending him. Why would I say the Atlanta Falcons? I mean, it's crazy. It's just where we are.
It's where we're at the last 24 hours for the 2025 NBA draft.
An indirect windy sleep up there. I tell you what, I think block some field goals, though.
Oh my God! Just put him right on the line. Although I bet you could low bridge him and take him right out.
No, on those 50 yards, you just put him back by the goalpost and have him like there's no such thing as goaltending.
I'm sure that's worth $30 million a year. All right, the Atlanta Hawks. Bontemps, the Celtics knew that they were going to have some salary crunch this year, even before Jason Tatum got hurt. When he got hurt, there was just no way they could justify spending this type of money. And so these 2 trades, I believe, have saved them close to $200 million in actual money in savings in salary and luxury tax because they're a repeater. So each tax dollar is worth $4, $5, $6, $7. I don't even know. It's a lot. So humongous cash savings. But more importantly, it drops them out of the second apron, which takes the shackles off in a number of different ways. I'm sure it's a tough moment for Boston fans, but if you're listening to Hoop Collective, you knew this was coming, and it was covered heavily in the media the last few weeks. We just didn't know how it was going to go, and they end up doing their business all in the day before the draft.
Well, then the one thing that we did talk about earlier, besides the 13 drafts that's going to carry over, is I think there's a chance the Celtics get out of the luxury tax completely, and they didn't save almost $200 million total. They saved almost $200 million in taxes. So you're talking they have gotten from having over $500 million projected payroll to well under $300 million, and they're now only, I want to say, $17 million over the luxury tax line completely because they saved about $22 million in payroll on the Porzingis deal, getting back pod favorite and pod legend George the Minivan Niang, Boston native, from the Hawks, and they saved several $1 million getting the expiring contract of Anthony Simons back from the Portland Trailblazers. And look, obviously, Celtics fans are going to see Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis leave, and Anthony Simons and George Niang come in and not be thrilled about the on-court situation. But as you said, there was no way this was going to be a $500 million team this summer. And frankly, the fact that the Celtics traded these 2 guys, in particular trading Drew Holiday to Portland, in a deal that really doesn't make any sense from the Portland side and ending up plus 1 second-round pick on the 2 trades, that is a far, far better return than I would have expected to save this kind of money. I mean, when I was at the finals, there was a lot of discussion from people around the league as to whether Boston would have to incentivize people to get off of both of these guys, given the financial ramifications that came along with it, and the fact that Porzingis had a great year when he was healthy, obviously had the weird illness over the second half of the year, has been banged up at times in his career. And Drew Holiday has 3 years and over $100 million left on his deal, and that was seen as a negative contract. So to come out of this the way they have, with basically, being up slightly on assets, having saved an absolute ton of money, and still having Anthony Simons, who they could either keep or move on again in another deal, and some other flexibility to do stuff. We'll see what happens with the rest of the roster over this week. I think it's been a great week for them. The Hawks part of the trade is super interesting.
Well, I don't know about a great week, but it's been an effective salary dump week.
I would say it's been a great week in terms of them accomplishing what they needed to. I mean, look, they had to save,
of accomplishing goals that aren't very pleasant.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say that if I'm a fan of the Celtics, I'm having a parade. But for the front office, they have saved a gazillion dollars and have done it while adding assets, not subtracting. So they have to do work on the roster, obviously, but they weren't going to be a championship level team next year anyway. And they have positioned themselves for the future without sacrificing any assets to do so from a financial standpoint, which, like I said, most people did not think. I do think the Portland deal side of the Holiday deal is very interesting. And I think Atlanta did a really nice job on the Porzingis part.
Well, we'll talk about that in a second.
Outdated nickname for George Niang. He's now the G-Wagon. Darius Garland gave him that because he's a little sleeker now, a little bit more expensive, but certainly not compared to Kristaps Porzingis, which is why this deal made sense for the Celtics and why former Hoop Collective guest George Niang continues his tour of the Eastern Conference. But yeah, look, man, like it's good business by the Celtics and just not much fun. And for Celtics fans, they knew this was coming. They knew the payroll was going to get slashed, and they bid farewell to the 2 finishing pieces from their recent championship team. But 2 guys who, look, this is going to have to be a gap year for the Celtics. It's not like they have a choice. The franchise player, unfortunately, is going to miss most, if not all, of next season. And they were already in a situation where they needed to shed salary. So, they will likely take not just a step back, but, they'll fall back significantly but be in position to hopefully bounce back. It will be interesting to see how over the next, not this summer, but next summer, how they try to replace the impact and production of these 2 guys. Again, the 2 guys who were the finishing pieces to their championship puzzle.
Well, they are going to get a big trade exception out of this deal, I would think. And, they are going to have, I think, some levers of flexibility they can move in different directions. We'll see what other trades they make too. They're probably going to do more stuff, I would think, from where they sit now. So there's probably a lot of work left to be done before the roster is complete. But look, it's what I would say is this is a continuing sign of Boston having a really good front office that is able to accomplish its goals at a pretty high level. And while in the moment, I agree, this is not a fun thing to hear for Celtics fans. This series of moves is not what a lot of other teams could pull off without having to sacrifice future assets. And the fact they have all those future assets leaves them in a position to, turn around and add pieces down the road and have different ways to do stuff. And that trade exception is going to be one avenue to eventually do so in the future.
All right. So Portland, they made a very aggressive move here. They finished the season 25-25, missed the playoffs. They extended Chauncey Billups, which, at one time that wasn't seen as a given. And Joe Cronin, their general manager, also got extended based on that 25-25 finish.
23-18 in the second half, so even a little bit more impressive.
23-18. That way. Good correction. 23-18. That's what they would probably prefer I highlight.
Yeah.
but they, and look, Drew Holiday is a winning player.
Mm-hmm.
McMahon, you want to use the line you used earlier? It's a
Yeah,
good
this
one.
guarantees that Portland's going to win the 25-26 NBA championship. When you trade for Drew Holiday, you win a championship the next season. That's an optimistic way to look at it. The pessimistic way is to say that streak is probably in some serious jeopardy.
Yeah. So the thing that's surprising about this is Holiday is 35, and he's owed 102 million. Oh, he's only 2 years guaranteed, but the third year's a player option for almost 40 million. I'm
When he'll be how old?
38,
Right.
37 to 38. So I'm wagering they should bake that he'd be picking that up. And so I'm surprised that a team that is not in position to get a finishing move, um, would do this. And I'm also surprised the team would do it, who's on the block. They're for sale. And
Yeah.
so typically you wouldn't take on $100 million contract to your books.
And
Now,
Well, and most of the NBA is surprised about, particularly them taking it on and not having to be incentivized by Boston to do so.
right.
And
And
that
look,
was the prevailing wisdom after the trade.
Anthony Simons has value. He's an offensive specialist. He's a gunner. He averages,
Mhm.
9 3-pointers a game, which will fit in with Joe Mazzulla if they indeed decide to keep him. But this wasn't like they got him for nothing. Like, Simons has value. And so
Right.
they did that plus the 2
And
seconds.
and I was going to
Yeah.
say, and they gave up the
That-
picks.
So now I will say, like, it's possible that Portland is in the middle of making a move here. They have between DeAndre Ayton, Matisse Thybulle, who picked up his $11.5 million player option today. Who else have they got? Who's
And Robert
expiring?
Williams, they have
Robert
$60 million
Williams.
in expiring
Yeah.
contracts with those three guys.
Well, and I think Williams in particular would be attractive to certain teams, especially a team that say would need a defensive anchor and lob
Well,
finisher.
the problem with that is, I love Big Bob as much as anybody, but he can't stay on the court, and again missed a ton of time
Yeah,
last year.
more
So,
knee surgery.
yeah, so if he can play, he could definitely be an impact player, but that's been a problem basically his whole career, and certainly has been basically his whole time in Portland. To me, this just feels like a team that is way too optimistic about its chances based off of winning a bunch of games in the second half of the year when most of the teams they were playing were not being very competitive. Like, if you look in the Western Conference, we're going to talk about the other trade that was made today with the Pelicans and Wizards. I think you can make a decent argument that Phoenix and Portland are fighting for 13th in the West right now. And if you're in that kind of position, or at best you're maybe knocking on the door of being in the play-in tournament,
Yeah.
take on this Drew Holiday money to now have 40% of your cap tied up in Drew Holiday and Jeremy Grant the next 3 years. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense for where this team should be sitting. And it also could be, again, blocking minutes for both Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe, two guys that were drafted very high in the lottery. Sharpe in particular has not really had a chance to get going in his career. Henderson likely will be the starting point guard next year. We'll see. Donovan Clingan was the backup for a lot of the year behind DeAndre Ayton. We'll see if Ayton's on the roster, if he's starting or not. Like, they just have, it feels like this should be a team that's turning the team over to its young players and letting them grow and letting them play and seeing what they have. And instead, they keep adding veteran players ahead of those guys. And this move to me screams they believe they can make the playoffs next year. And I do not see that in the cards.
It is a very aggressive, expensive win now move for a team that it's going to be tough to crack even the play-in in the Western Conference. And look, I think Portland's got a solid roster. I think if they're in the East, we'd be talking about them as a potential playoff team, but they're not. Now, if I want to kind of put my rose garden color glasses on, then I would say, hey, they did go 23-18 in the second half of last season. They had the third best defense in the league during that half season stretch. You add Drew Holiday as the veteran leader of that core, and I can make an argument that them having something to play for late in the season, being put in competitive situations can benefit the development of guys like Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, Donovan Clingan. I I can make that argument, but man, it's a really expensive route. Um, Certainly, I think Drew Holiday is going to be a consummate pro. He always has been. Got to be a tough pill for him to swallow too, though. This is a guy who, since he got traded to Milwaukee, what was that, in 2020, has been in nothing but contender situations. And Portland can be a scrappy bunch, but again, it's going to be hard for them to crack the play-in in the West.
Well, how do you feel about the fact that Drew Holiday had his lowest field goal percentage in 9 years and his lowest 3-point percentage in 5 years this year, Bontemps?
Well, I mean, again, like this is why people did not think he was going to be a guy who you'd be getting positive return for in a trade if you're Boston. And look, Drew also is a guy who has always sort of slotted in whatever the team needs. And he was on a team with a bunch of guys who needed the ball. So I think he was happy to take steps back. And whenever they needed him to do something, like I remember one of the games against Orlando, he had, I think, 2 or 3 threes and a couple steals in the final couple minutes of one of the playoff games to win the game. Like he is a guy that makes winning plays and is absolutely the kind of guy you want to have on your team. But yeah, look, I really hate the deal for Portland. I just do. I don't get what they're doing. They keep making a lot of moves to try to aggressively try to speed up their timeline when I don't think they really should be. And we're probably going to see Phoenix, we talked about in the last pod, make a lot of trades this week to try to improve their roster too. And I think they're both in similar boats where I just don't see how either of those teams is getting into the 8 in the West. And I think it's going to be a real struggle for them to get into the 10, which is why taking on all this money and doing so at a cost is just very confusing.
All right, so let's take a look at Atlanta's spot. I think Atlanta was, sort of sitting on the sidelines. They've got some big trade exceptions, and so they were almost acting like a cap space team this week. And I think they were involved in some 3-team trades. In fact, pretty sure that they were involved in some conversations on some Durant possible 3-team trades that ended up not happening. And they're watching, and they're like, Boston's taking pieces apart. We're not sure what's going to happen with Indiana with the Halliburton injury. We're not sure what's going to happen with Milwaukee, just with their roster or with Giannis.
Look, they also had Terrence Mann they were trying to get off too.
Well, that's true. They were definitely
part of it.
Yeah, and so I think they're looking around. They're I don't even know what their record was. They've been a play-in team like 3 or 4 years in a row, but they had some significant injuries to their team, including their dynamic young wing Jalen Johnson. He missed a bunch of the year with a shoulder injury. I think they looked around and said, hey, is there something we can do here? They were involved with Boston on Drew Holiday. They didn't get that deal done, but then they get a deal done with Boston. And so considering what the Trailblazers sent for Drew Holiday, what they sent the 22nd pick in this draft. They already have a lottery pick, right? They got like the 13th pick.
They have the 13th pick, which they have from Sacramento from the Kevin Huerter trade years ago. Obviously, their pick was the 14th pick, which went to the Spurs as part of the first DeJounte Murray trade. And then they had the 22nd pick which was the Lakers pick from back in the.
This is the last piece of the Anthony Davis.
Piece of the Anthony Davis trade, and also was part of the second DeJounte Murray trade, where Dyson Daniels and that pick came over last year. And look, the way to look at this.
Yeah, can I pause you right there for a second?
Yeah.
When that DeJounte Murray trade happened a year ago, almost like a year ago right now, the return for DeJounte Murray was sort of deemed a little tepid. However,
not by some people.
Well, whatever. Dyson Daniels has become an all defensive team player. So they got in that deal.
Player in the league.
And now they've used, basically the remnants of this to also acquire Kristaps Porzingis. So now Porzingis' health is obviously paramount. But if I told you that they traded for an all-defensive team player and Kristaps Porzingis for DeJounte Murray, you'd feel a little different about it. So I'll just point that out.
Well, and they used that pick. I mean, again, Boston didn't get that pick. The very quick thing on the Nets. Nets now have 5 first-round picks in Wednesday's draft. 4 of them after the 19th selection, 3 in the 20s. They got the 19th pick to take on Terrence Mann. They have a ton of cap space this summer, so they still have over $30 million even after that deal.
They got just for housekeeping, they got the 22nd pick to take on Terrence Mann. Picks 19 and 26 they got from the Knicks for Mikal Bridges.
Right. So they have 5 picks in the first round. It seems unlikely they will draft 5 players. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But yeah, look, Boston ended up, I think, swapping to a better second. They got Cleveland second and gave up a bad second to get off Porzingis and take on Niang, save a whole ton of money. If you're Atlanta, like you come out of this, you've got, assuming Jalen Johnson's healthy, they're starting 5 as of this morning. Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, Zachary Richardson, last year's number 1 overall pick, Jalen Johnson, and Onyeka Okongwu, 4 big, long, athletic defensive guys with some of them with varying offensive ability around Trae Young. Now you add Kristaps Porzingis, who last year shot 41% from 3, has refined his game. Quinn Snyder certainly is going to find ways to take advantage of him offensively. Like, I really like the fit there. And at the cost of the 22nd pick and getting off this future money for Terrence Mann, which is pretty negative money on their books, they don't have any bad money going forward. They've got clean books. Jalen Johnson's on a really good extension. We'll see what happens with Dyson Daniels this summer. He's got some interesting extension negotiations. Trae Young with a player option for the 26-27 season. Super interesting extension negotiations for him this summer. We'll see what happens there. But
I'd be stunned if he gets offered enough that he wants to take it. But
well, it depends, I think, on what he decides his market is. Like, I don't know if there's going to be a super frothy market for Trae Young next summer, and there could be some value with lock it in at a lower number long term with the only team he's ever played for, because it is a decent fit for him there roster wise.
no, I'm not saying they want to get rid of him. I'm just saying they don't necessarily want to pay him the max.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I think it could make sense on both sides to sign something lower. We'll see where it lands. But Atlanta's in a pretty interesting spot. And when you look at all these teams in the East that have all of these injuries, like the Hawks, who have been kind of floating in an in-between spot, like, I think giving up the 22nd pick to get off a man and get Porzingis while having a lottery pick, it's pretty good business for them. I think.
They don't have control of their next 2 drafts because of the DeJounte Murray trade acquiring him with San Antonio. So they're incentivized to try to hit the gas a little bit, and they still didn't harm their long-term flexibility. I am told that they had not negotiated an extension with Porzingis. So he's on the last year of his contract. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Also, they got to check out Porzingis, because if you remember, he had that illness. I don't know, it was a virus or whatever. And the last I heard from him, I was with you, Bontemps, in the Celtics locker room after they lost Game 6 to the Knicks. He was like, I'm going to go to the beach and hope that resetting my body makes me feel better. So I don't know. I would check on that. I'm sure they did before they did this trade. But
he also said he was planning on playing in Eurobasket with Latvia. So, I mean, there's reasons for optimism. But look, he's also on an expiring deal. So, they get out of this Terrence Mann money, which was not good. That was truly a negative deal around the league. And, look, I think it's an interesting upside swing for them. Porzingis is another guy. If he's healthy, they could potentially get him on a pretty good extension going forward. And, like, suddenly the Hawks have some optimism, I think, and are in an interesting spot after not too long ago, like a year ago this time, you're looking at them saying, man, they got these 2 point guards. Where are they going? What are they doing? Now things look a lot different.
Jalen Johnson is a dynamic player. Richardson had a very good second half. Dyson Daniels was a revelation. They just traded for Porzingis. Trae Young is an all-star level player. And
they got a lottery pick.
And they have a lottery pick, and they have not damaged, like they're not like headed for the second apron or anything, unless they give Trae the max. But
by the way, Porzingis on his Instagram stories today said, "Thanks for all the support and questions about my health. I've been feeling excellent all offseason and looking forward to a healthy and strong European Championship tournament with my national team." That was well before the trade. He might have known the trade was in the works at that point. But look, when you have Trae Young, you've got a guy who's an elite offensive engine that needs to be protected immensely on the defensive end. They've put together a group around him. Daniel's one of the best on-ball defenders in the league. Johnson, Risachet, there's some length and athleticism at the forward spots. Okongwu's a very solid defensive player. Porzingis, one of the better rim protectors in the league. And in an East that's wide open, I think the Hawks, after kind of being a perpetual playing team, at least qualify as intriguing going into next season.
Well, and they've also got some, to Brian's point, I mean, they've still got some flexibility to potentially go add another decent sized piece this summer, maybe, if they position things right. So yeah, it's they're in an interesting spot, and all this movement, I think, just portends what's going to be a very active day Wednesday and a very active offseason from a trade standpoint, where there's not a lot of salary cap space, and now there's less because the Nets got Terrence Mann. But you got a lot of teams, especially with these injuries, are going to be looking to potentially move pieces around and figure out where they're at. And, I think there's a lot of fireworks ahead.
Now joined by Jonathan Givony of Draft Express for a long time, because he founded it, and it's still an iconic brand in the NBA draft world. And of course, our draft reporter and analyst here at ESPN, Jonathan. I don't know how much sleep you're going to be getting this week, but this is what you spend years getting ready for.
Yeah, I mean, the work has mostly been done, but there's some changes that could happen here with potential trades. I'm sure we'll talk about them, and there's definitely some drama at the top, but this is the best time of year, and so I love it.
Yeah, so Cooper, there's no drama at number one. Cooper Flagg is going number one. He'll be a Dallas Maverick. There's been a lot discussed about Cooper Flagg. Let me ask you this, Jonathan. How long ago did you know that Cooper Flagg was going to be the number one pick?
Well, the first time I saw him was 3 years ago at the Under-17 World Cup in Malaga, and he was 15 years old at the time, playing up by 2 years, and just his performance in the finals against Spain, against Hugo Gonzalez and Adai Mara, was absolutely spectacular. Just the things that he was doing defensively, just the level of intensity that he brought, the physicality. Usually guys who are 15 playing up 2 years are, they're a little meek at that stage. But he was the best player on the floor, and it started to become evident already then that this guy has a chance to be an absolutely special player. And just the progression that he's made since with his offensive ability. He was playing the 5 back then, and he was this incredible defender who was switching 1 through 5 and rotating for blocks and getting in passing lanes and getting every rebound and finding ways to score in ways that guys usually do at the youth level, in transition and off the offensive glass and cutting. But just the way that he's improved since with his shooting and his ball handling and his passing is remarkable. And especially in season, since he turned 18, in December, he was on this absolute heater as a shooter, and the Duke put the ball in his hands. He was playing pick and roll, and he was the best player in college basketball, which absolutely cannot be understated for a guy who should have been still a senior in high school. It's a major transition to make, even for a 19-year-old high school senior, let alone a 17-year-old. So he's absolutely a special player, and I expect him to be an all-star and a franchise player, and maybe a guy that, is even able to reach higher than that. People know me. I don't like to gush about players. I don't like to put, insane expectations, talk about Hall of Fame and all that. But he has everything that you look for from a player that age to be an all-NBA guy and more than that.
Well, for a guy who's 18 years old, he has very good bulk. So many times we see really talented guys, and obviously he'll still develop. He'll still physically develop. But, sometimes you see guys, you're like, well, he's going to come into the NBA and get pushed around. You just see it. And I mean, there will be nights, I'm sure, where Cooper Flagg has to learn what the physicality of the league is. But, he's 220, I think is what he weighed. And, he'll get stronger. But when I look at him, I say that's a guy who will not be physically dominated in the NBA, which so many 18-year-olds are.
Yeah, no question about it. He's got a great frame that is going to continue to grow. And, he's actually he's grown in stature over the last year. He's added almost an inch here. He's added 12 pounds. Like you said, he's 221 pounds. He might not be done growing, which is pretty scary for everybody, in that Southwest division with the Dallas Mavericks.
Okay, so you've had Dylan Harper solidly too for a long time. What is the most important thing for somebody who's just now turning their eyes to the draft to know about Dylan Harper?
Yeah, I mean, since the playoffs have started, I think that Dylan Harper's stock has only increased. I just think about that opening round between the Pistons and the Knicks, and you just see the level of physicality that was on display on both ends of the floor. Just how much of a war it is in terms of having a guy who is big and strong and can get to the rim and take hits and play through contact and draw fouls, finish at the rim, but also find teammates on the move. That's Dylan Harper, and that's what he brings. Is there's some comps to guys like James Harden, like Cade Cunningham. That is the level of shot creator that Dylan Harper could become, and I think with NBA spacing, with better teammates around him, I think we're going to see more in terms of him as a passer. Also, things that we saw in flashes definitely this year at Rutgers, but his feel for the game and the way that he embraces contact and physicality, and just the way that he's able to finish with creativity and the way that he can get to spots on the floor. Every team in the NBA is looking for that right now. And that's why Dylan Harper has a very high floor, but also a tremendous ceiling. And you talk to people, that have spoken with San Antonio, even before the lottery, they've been in love with this guy for a very long time. And they, the moment that they got that number 2 pick, there wasn't even a thought there about entertaining trades, about looking at other prospects. They haven't worked anybody else out for that number 2 pick. It's just been Dylan Harper.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Go ahead.
People are saying like, well, De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, you need shooting around Victor, which is all true. But they're saying, guys, we are in this for the long haul. We're looking to build long term, and you need an all-star caliber guy alongside Victor, to handle the ball and take pressure off him and all that. And so, that's why you've seen some speculation online, like, oh, they're entertaining trades and all that. Yeah, people behind them people have been calling about that number 2 pick, but I don't think there's ever been a moment where the Spurs have, even entertained the idea of drafting anybody other than Dylan Harper at 2.
Yeah, I think there was an idea that, like, well, maybe if Giannis was available,
sure,
that number 2 pick would come into play. Giannis has not been available.
Yes.
Future Hall of Famers, like, knocking on their door saying, trade me there.
Right.
Jonathan, obviously you and I spent a lot of time getting to know Victor Wembanyama, you even longer. And I was the one, a year ago saying somebody is going to want to get themselves to San Antonio to be aligned with this guy. It turned out De'Aaron Fox got there first. Right. But here's the Spurs in position where and by the way, not only was Kevin Durant knocking on their door, the Spurs could have done that deal. The Spurs could have made a Kevin Durant deal.
Sure.
And them saying, with all due respect, no, we want this guy more. And I think that's important because we're going to talk about Ace Bailey in a minute. And I think a lot of people, for better or worse, especially who haven't been following your coverage, may connect Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper a little bit because they both played at Rutgers, and Rutgers underachieved this year. And Dylan Harper has been the story of the draft lead up. But as you said, Dylan Harper's stock has only grown. The Spurs have only locked into that despite their depth on the perimeter and despite the interest from other players. So I do think that that's relevant. Okay. So the number 3 spot in your mock has been where you spent a lot of time. I'm sure the time you've had discussing with the executives and scouts. Let's tell us who you have on your list as number 3, and then who you have in your mock as number 3, because that's where that's where the draft really starts.
Yeah, I have Ace Bailey 3rd on my big board, but I have VJ Edgecombe going there in my mock draft. I'm not sure that this decision has been made from Philadelphia. Even yesterday, Saturday, it sounds like they were in all-day meetings trying to figure out what direction to take. Now you're hearing, oh, maybe they might entertain, trade possibilities. I'm not sure that, if how much like ownership, for example, will be excited about that. But yeah, I think that's where the draft starts, like we've talked about at 3. Ace Bailey's decision not to work out there, to schedule a workout and then cancel, definitely threw a wrench in their plans. VJ Edgecombe may have been ahead of Ace Bailey already before that. You heard a lot of positivity coming out of VJ Edgecombe's workout, not necessarily in terms of what he showed on the court. I heard that he was very nervous. It's a very unnatural setting, that 1-on-0 setting, but just I think what resonates more is the meeting, like the dinners and the breakfast and getting to, meet with guys like Tyrese Maxey and ownership and all that in the front office. I mean, I think that's what people really care about more with those visits. And Ace Bailey deciding, to bail on that entirely definitely puts, Philadelphia in a tough position because Daryl Morey is the kind of guy who could still draft Ace Bailey third. But this is a tough season that they're coming off of. And there's, a lot of questions about Embiid long-term with his knee, which, by the way, there's some positivity that we're hearing around, Embiid's availability, but still Paul George's contract. A lot of people think that might be the worst contract in the NBA right now, along with Bradley Beal. And so you draft a guy who doesn't want to be there. And if it doesn't work out, if it doesn't start off, on the best light, that puts a lot of pressure on you as a front office. And so, and there's quite a few people in the NBA who think VJ Edgecombe is a better prospect regardless. It's not a big gap between 3 and 4. VJ is 4th on my big board. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a really interesting decision to see what they do. Do they take Edgecombe? Do they take Bailey? Do they trade down? I think all those possibilities are still in play right now.
So what do you like? What do you like about Edgecombe and, as a player?
Just the explosiveness. I mean, just first of all, the trajectory that he's on. He played his high school basketball in Long Island, so I've been able to watch him here for over the last 2-3 years. He was really just a defender early on in his career. He wasn't even ranked in the top 100 the first time that I saw him, but just the intensity that he brings, just the defensive versatility, that toughness, that edge. But his ball skills have gotten significantly better. He's become a guy that you could legitimately see playing point guard at some stage in his career. I think what really sold people was what we saw from him in the Bahamas national team this past summer, playing in the FIBA Olympic qualifying tournament against Spain, against Poland. He was playing point guard alongside Buddy Hield, Eric Gordon, DeAndre Ayton. He was the best player on the floor. When you have that level of explosiveness, where you can get to anywhere you want on the court, when you're that dynamic in transition and the type of shooting that he showed in the Big 12 in flashes, it wasn't consistent. But the upside with VJ Edgecombe is through the roof. Now, again, shades of Dylan Harper's situation in San Antonio. How does VJ Edgecombe fit on that roster with Tyrese Maxey, with Jared McCain, with Quentin Grimes? I think in VJ Edgecombe's mind, at least in his camp's mind, having that runway to play on the ball and to develop into a guy that can be a point guard, I think is going to be important for him. How much room is he going to have there to explore that on, this is a team that was projected to contend for a championship this past season. And so there's going to be a certain amount of pressure on him. But I think everybody that's drafting at the top, I think you really have to throw fit out the window. You have to take the guy who's going to be the best player 5 years from now. Rosters change, but like when you do a redraft, you want to feel like you drafted the guy who is the best available talent at that slot, regardless of position. And I think that feels like that's the way that Philadelphia is leaning right now, that VJ Edgecombe is that guy at 3.
Yeah, so you talked about last summer. Obviously, last summer when Cooper Flagg played in the Team USA select team, that was actually a big moment. So that was a big thing. So Ace Bailey, Jonathan, how much of it do you think is a strategy, and how much of it do you think is a mistake, the way his process has gone?
I think it's a clear strategy, and I think it's not that unique, honestly. We saw this last year with Alex Sarr, basically trying to maneuver himself to Washington at 2, passing up a workout with Atlanta. It was more tastefully done, it feels like. I mean, just the scheduling and the canceling, I think that, that may have rubbed some people the wrong way, but every agent in this business is looking to position their client to get to that second contract and to reach their full potential as a player, which ideally involves minutes, a role, shots, development. You look at like Reed Shepherd. He was drafted 3rd last year to a situation not all that different than Philadelphia right now, was barely able to get on the court for Houston. The guy drafted behind him, Steph Castle, became Rookie of the Year. And so obviously it's way too early to write off Reed Shepherd. I think he's still going to have a very good NBA career, but that's a situation that a lot of agents are following what's going on right now with Ace Bailey and saying, there might be a method to the madness here where if Ace Bailey has a preferred destination in mind, be it Washington at 6 or New Orleans at 7 or Brooklyn at 8, there's a lot more opportunity there in those backcourts than in Philadelphia at 3 or even Charlotte at 4 with LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. So I don't think that, the criticism that we're hearing for Ace Bailey, I think maybe a little bit over the top, because this is something that we see every year. And in the past, agents used to be able to hide the medical, and really be a little bit more forceful and saying, like, do not draft my client here. You're not, we're not going to give you and the medical part was scary. Now they've changed the rules, and every team in the lottery is getting access to the medical. So it makes it a little bit harder to pull this off. But if Ace Bailey is able to get himself drafted to Washington at 6, and we find out that that's where he wanted to be all along, then Ace Bailey's agent did well for his client. If it obviously works out, you could say, Utah, I think that's a good situation. I think that I don't quite understand why they don't like Utah with the coaching staff there, the fan base there, the opportunity on the perimeter. But to each his own. Geography plays a big role in this too. So what do you think about this, Brian?
Well, I think if you look, first off, talking about the second contract when you haven't played a minute and you didn't have a killer college year, it's a little bit of a turnoff to me. However, what you said is all accurate. Like, if you are an agent and you want your player to be not, because here's what's happened. What's happened is, in this top 3 picks, the teams that ended up in the top 3 are all teams that are more built out than your typical top 3, right? Yeah. Dallas is more built out. Now, granted, Kyrie is hurt. Obviously, San Antonio has had the last 2 rookies of the year. And they have some other veterans, with starting jobs. Vassell and Harrison Barnes are starters. They may not be starters when the season starts, but they're in the starters role right now. Obviously, Philadelphia is, a complete anomaly to have the 3rd pick. And so I kind of get that. I kind of get you're looking and saying, man, my guy could be the franchise player. My guy could wake up as the franchise player in Brooklyn, because, Brooklyn's sitting there at the 8th pick. And, they don't think they can have a chance to draft a talent like this. Like, it's, if they could help maneuver, and the guy has to take, a couple of weeks of bad headlines to maneuver himself to Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Or where you've got him in the mock right now, which we haven't quite got there, but you mentioned Washington. You've got Ace Bailey, Washington. Washington doesn't have a franchise player right now. Now, maybe Alex Sarr will have, he had a good finish to his rookie year. Maybe a year from now, we'll say Alex Sarr is their franchise player. But he's
always going to be on the defensive side, though. It's not,
right.
He's not going to be a guy who's creating his own shot, who's, averaging 20, 25 points a game, like Ace Bailey could potentially become if he hits.
Right. So what I'm basically saying is, I don't like it, but I kind of get it.
Right.
But, there's this stuff around Bailey, like, he was listed at 6'10", and he comes in and he measures at 6'7.5". I don't know whether you care about that.
Barefoot, that's, in shoes, he's 6'9". He's got great size. So he's an inch shorter than people
right.
thought.
But I'm just saying, there's all these things about him that, like,
right.
That teams would, kind of put down as a red mark on their board. So, but I've called him like now this is your world, but every year, or, maybe there's 1 or 2, there's a dangerous player in the draft, because they're dangerous, not because drafting them is bad. They're dangerous just because if you pass on them, you could have egg all over your face. You get fired for passing on. Like, this is a situation with Luka Doncic, right? Not that I'm comparing Ace Bailey to Luka Doncic. 3 teams said no to Luka,
right?
Potentially even more. And those guys, it's on their records forever.
Yeah.
Like Vlade Divac. Well, his executive is by the way, Vlade was in a motorcycle accident with Asmar Best. Vlade passing on Luka is defined his era, passing on a guy. Obviously, you take a guy who's
Bagley, especially
correct. Obviously, you take a guy that's a bust, and that's a problem. So that's the thing. Here's a guy who's got some red marks on the sheet. You take him, he ends up being a bust. That's bad. You pass on him, and he goes to Brooklyn and wins Rookie of the Year and averages 27 points his rookie year.
Yeah.
The teams that passed on him look bad. So that's why I think he's the most dangerous prospect in the draft. Not
Sure.
that that's a bad thing. It
Right.
sort of goes both ways.
Right.
And a lot of it's just from listening to you about him. I'm not, this is just my perception from learning from you. All right. Now let's talk about a guy that obviously I knew, Con Knippel was, he goes to Duke as a 5-star recruit, certainly was a ticket as a lottery pick. But when we start talking about these guys early in the season, you were extremely high on Con, and you have remained there, and he has gone up the boards. I don't know where he was on your mock at the start of the season, but now you got him 4th going to Charlotte.
I mean, he was like 7 or 8, but a lot of that was because I went to preseason practices. I saw a scrimmage, and just talking to John Shire the entire year leading up to Con enrolling at Duke, he was like, man, keep your eye on Con, keep your eye on Con, keep your eye on Con. This guy is way underrated. Like he's cut from the same cloth as like a Reed Shepherd, just in terms of his feel for the game, his competitiveness, the versatility, but he's 6'7". And so, I mean, that if Reed Shepherd was 6'7", he probably would have been the number 1 pick in the draft last year. And so he had so much belief in him, and that was part of the reason. I mean, I went to do an interview with Cooper Flagg, the only one-on-one that he did all year, but I was able to watch Con scrimmage, and he absolutely dominated that scrimmage, even more so than Cooper Flagg. And I was like, this guy is, easy top 10 pick, maybe top 5. And so, he just grew and grew as the year moved on. And similar to Cooper, like the coaching staff put the ball in his hands, let him play pick and roll, let him show his playmaking ability, his feel for the game, the way he plays off 2 feet. And then he's a movement shooter. He's an outstanding spot up shooter. He brings toughness. He's a great teammate. He's unselfish. So I think already in October, I was saying this guy could be Klay Thompson, and
yes, I remember it quite well when you said that.
Yeah. So, I mean, and right now it's looking like he's going to get drafted probably 4th or 5th.
And so do you feel that Charlotte's probably pretty settled on that, unless somebody like jumps ahead of them and grabs?
I think that they're still making up their mind. I think there are several guys. I mean, they haven't totally ruled out the idea of drafting Ace Bailey. I think Jeremiah Fears, even though he hasn't worked out for them, is someone that they're definitely considering. Trey Johnson could fit very nicely into their roster. But, you look at Con and, his fit with LaMelo Ball, with Brandon Miller. You look at just the feel for the game, the ability to, be a guy that can be the face of your franchise. You put him in front of, every practice, press conferences, all that.
Don't underestimate taking a Duke guy in Charlotte. Like,
absolutely.
I mean, not that would be the driving force, but
their owner and the fan base. Exactly. Yeah. That would be very exciting for them, I'm sure. So I think there's a lot of smoke pointing to Con, but I don't think that they've made up their mind either way. And again, I think we could see some movement here, like in that 3 through 8 range. And, I don't think that like a team outside the top 8 moves into the top 8, but I could really see some musical chairs being played here between those teams between 3 and 8, especially with the Ace Bailey situation.
Yeah, that's true. So number 5, which is Utah, we have a brand new lead executive there, Austin Ainge, although his father, Danny, and Justin Zanuck, long entrenched there. It's not like he replaced anybody. This is one that's moved around in your mock, and I'm not even sure where you will be on draft night. Your mock could change several times. So reading Utah seems to be a challenge. This is going to be where mock drafts could go sideways here.
Yeah, a lot of it is because the Ace Bailey situation, like if he ends up going, he doesn't want to be at 3, 4, or 5. And so do people respect his wishes? And does he end up going behind Utah? And that means we're introducing like a new group of players here at 4 and 5. And that's where a lot of the uncertainty has come from. And, how do they value the guys on their roster? They've drafted a lot the past few years. Doesn't feel like any of those guys are really long-term keepers, like surefire guys that you say like, I don't want to put a roadblock. None of them have been a franchise
player. Their franchise player right now is Larry Markkinen, and that's not producing that alignment is not producing greatness. So,
right. So how married will Austin Ainge be to Keontae George or Isaiah Collier? I would think not at all. That's
Right.
when we have
I
Jeremiah
agree.
Fears there at 5. I mean, that would raise some eyebrows because they drafted point guards the last 2 years, and so now you're drafting a third one on top of them, and so. I mean, there's some thought about Trey Johnson here, obviously. I mean, I'm sure they're going to look at the Ace Bailey situation too. I don't think, Austin Ames gives a damn, like whether Ace Bailey wants to be there or not. If he thinks he's the guy, he'll
Well,
take
in
him.
Utah, you can't run the Jazz and worry about whether a guy wants to be there. You'll never get anywhere. I mean,
And once he
the
gets
truth.
there, he'll be like, this place is beautiful. This fan base is insane. Like they freaking love this team. This coaching staff is incredible. And so, I'm sure you get over it very, very quickly because it's a big runway there too. They need a star in the worst way also.
I mean, and allegedly they're trying to win. So we'll see. I mean, they've been tanking for 3 years. Of course they're trying to win, but they could actually do some things to upgrade the roster here in this summer. Okay, you mentioned Jeremiah Fears. This is a guy, point guard out of Oklahoma. He has been a riser. You think there's a possibility he could go in the top 5. What about Jeremiah Fears has him going up the draft boards in your mocks?
Just 6'4", can get anywhere he wants on the court. Tremendous ball handler, tremendous pace. Gets to his spots, can find guys, finishes with both hands. 18 years old, doesn't turn 19 until October. He made a late decision to reclassify. Was one of the youngest players in college basketball, but had a great season at Oklahoma. Playing in the toughest conference in college basketball in the SEC, led them to the NCAA tournament. Had some incredible games in the SEC tournament. In the NCAA tournament against UConn, he was fantastic. And so, that kind of really dynamic shot creating guard who can get to his spots on the floor, play pick and roll, score as well. Those guys are not easy to come by, and so it might take him some time because his frame is still filling out. His defense is just okay right now. His shooting is streaky. But if you're projecting out, 3 to 5 years, Jeremiah Fears could absolutely be one of the best players in this draft.
You have these guys in 5, 6, 7. There's a lot of potential fluidity there. Do you think Washington passes on Ace Bailey if he's there at 6?
I would be surprised if they did.
I would agree. And at 7, you and Jeremy Woo have talked about how the Pelicans at 7 are in an advantageous position because they're almost assured of because you mentioned Trey Johnson, he could still be there. People like Trey Johnson.
Watch.
Yes. Yeah. The 7th pick is not a terrible place to be for New Orleans because there's almost assuredly going to be a guy there the picks are hard to pick there because the talent level is equal. Their pick is farther down, but they may be in a decent spot.
But what if they decide we love Ace Bailey and they say, here's 7 and 23 and something, and let's move up to 5, and then.
Yeah, they picked up Indiana's first round pick last week.
And they move ahead of Washington. They take Ace Bailey, and then they're and then Utah is still. I don't know how many picks Utah already needs, to be honest with you. But is there somebody on Utah's roster that they like? Sorry, a New Orleans roster. Obviously Herb Jones, Trey Murphy. Those guys probably aren't going anywhere. But that's where I think you could see these musical chairs being played. At this part of the draft.
Okay, you mentioned Kaman Maluach out of Duke, the center. Very rarely do I be able to say I saw a guy 2 years before he got to the draft. I remember talking to you about Kaman when I saw the South Sudanese team play in the World Cup in 2023. He's come a long way since then. Obviously, a lot of people saw him play at Duke. You've got him to Brooklyn right now at 8. By the time this pod comes out, there could be changes. But what do you think about Kaman? I didn't think he was going to be a top 10 pick when I saw him 2 years ago, but he's gotten a lot better.
That's exactly right. He's gotten so much better. The first time I saw Kaman was 4 years ago at the NBA Academy Games in Mexico. He was scrawny. He was uncoordinated. He could barely chew gum and run at the same time. And his skill level was bad. He couldn't catch the ball. He couldn't finish. He was unathletic. And just to see the way that he's improved year after year, what he's done with his body, what he's done with his skill level, what he's done with his mobility, just the impact that he had this year defensively. Duke was one of the best defensive teams in the country, and a lot of it was because of Cooper Flagg, but obviously a lot of it was because of Kaman Malawach anchoring the paint, being this huge deterrent. Teams wouldn't even drive into the paint because he's so long, 7'7" wingspan, 9'6" standing reach. But he's not just a guy that just parks under the rim with his arms up. He can hedge out to the perimeter. He can show really hard. He can switch and slide his feet. And the scary part about Kaman is that he hasn't been playing basketball for that long. And so what is he going to be 3 or 4 years from now? People talk about his character, his work ethic, just what he brings to every room, how he lights it up, how he's beloved by coaches and by teammates. You look at the NBA Finals right now. You need that kind of rim protector inside. Chet Holmgren for OKC, Miles Turner for Indiana. And you go and watch him work out. You're seeing him drain 3 after 3. The touch, the way the ball comes out of his hand, it gets you excited. And you really start to wonder, how high could this guy's upside be? And so that's why Kaman Malawach is going to get picked in the top 10, and it might end up being, like 7 or 8. I know New Orleans is looking really hard at him. I know Brooklyn's looking very hard at him. Is there some movement here in this stage of the draft? And so I think Kaman Malawach is going to be a very, very good NBA player.
Let me just ask you before we go, if there's one other guy in the lottery of the draft who's a Gavoni favorite who you really like, who is another guy that you would want to mention, even if he's not a top 10 pick?
Yeah, I would say Kasparas Yakuchonis is somebody that people have kind of forgotten about a little bit in this process. 6'6", great pick and roll player, makes every read out of ball screens, has great frame, great toughness about him, shot making prowess. The strides that Kasparas Yakuchonis has made over the past few years has been astounding. And I think that, the ability to play 1, 2, 3, you could put him onto pretty much any roster in the NBA. He's going to find a way to add value. So I think he's going to be, someone that comes off the board pretty quickly, like in this 9 through, and say 12 range, it feels like. And he's going to be a guy that's, maybe not the most explosive player around. Kind of finished off the year a little bit of a not a great note in terms of the turnovers, and he got beaten up really in the Big Ten. But I think Kasparas Yakuchonis is going to be an outstanding NBA player long term.
Yeah, another interesting point guard of good size that you've got in the top of this draft, and because there's a lot of them, maybe he slipped back because of it, but. All right, Jonathan, we've literally just a fraction of what you provided insight. Good luck with all of the demands that you have this week. I'll see you in Brooklyn later this week. Thank you for spending some time with us and helping our listeners get smarter ahead of this draft, including me. And we'll talk to you soon.
Of course, my pleasure. Great to be with you.
Thank you to Jonathan Gavoni. Business for the Dallas Mavericks today. As he was within a couple hours of the deadline of his player option, McMahon, Kyrie Irving agrees to a new deal, opts out of his contract as he recovers from his torn ACL, agrees to a new deal with the Celtics.
There's
been a Celtic for a long time. With the Mavericks, 3 years, $114 million. The last year of that, 119 million. The last year of it is a player option. McMahon, what are we to make of this?
Very good news for the Mavericks, a very good development. Certainly earlier in the day, perhaps even when we podcasted earlier, the anticipation was that Kyrie was going to opt in, which would not have been good news for the Mavericks, because when a player of that stature opts in, it means they didn't get anything done on a long-term deal. And it sounds weird, but an opt-in means that relationship's probably not going to last a whole lot longer, but there was middle ground that was
That's what happened on his last deal. He opted in with the Nets, and it was like an indication he ain't going to be there for very long, and eventually got traded to the Mavericks.
Right, and there was middle ground reached here. Now, look, before Kyrie had the knee injury, the anticipation was this would be more like a 3 or $150 million deal, where things got sticky aside from simply the fact that this is a guard in his 30s coming off a torn ACL. Where things really got sticky is the clearest path to the Mavericks acquiring a fill-in for him for the first half or so of the season that he's going to have to miss. A guy who can start at point guard and then transition into a six-man type of role. The clearest path is their taxpayer mid-level. And so they had to get Kyrie. I think this is like the tip top of the range that they could sign Kyrie to and preserve that taxpayer mid-level, not be a second apron team where that thing goes poof. And so, I mean, we'll see what they're able to do with it. There's candidates out there, same kind of candidates, by the way, that the Bucks will be going after. Guys like Dennis Schroeder. We'll see if he might end up staying in Detroit. I think there's certainly interest there. Chris
Yeah. By
Paul.
the way, Detroit, who was a team that we wondered whether or not how aggressive they would be, because they looked at some other teams in the East who were dealing with injuries, and they have cap flexibility, and they're an ascendant team. Their team president, Trajan Langdon, said today he does not plan to be aggressive in this offseason and hopes to keep the team relatively stable. Now, he's not under obligation to follow through with that, but that would indicate that Detroit wants to re-sign a guy like Dennis Schroeder, re-sign a guy like Malik Beasley, maybe re-sign Tim Hardaway Jr. I don't know, but they
made a massive leap last year, so that makes some sense. But Dennis Schroeder, Chris Paul, Malcolm Brogdon, D'Angelo Russell, Tyus Jones, that's the kind of pool that you're looking at there. But I mean, the most important thing here is what could have been a messy situation if Kyrie's opting in, and then it's like, oh, how temporary is this? It's not messy. Kyrie, his stepmom and agent should tell you, Riley Irving, Nico Harrison of the Mavericks, they got something worked out that made sense for everybody involved. It's a 3-year deal. It's really, it's a 2+1. He's aligned with Anthony Davis contractually, and they're adding Cooper Flagg to the mix. Obviously Cooper Flagg is
some needed good news for the Mavericks, quite frankly.
Yes. And I mean, and on the heels of the Daniel Gafford extension, which I think was a very good deal for the Mavericks, and they like having that depth at center with Gafford. But it's 3 years, like 54 guarantee. There's trade kickers and all that. It's a quality starting center deal that is immensely tradable. Whether he starts,
can't be tradable immediately, just because, which I think is an important distinction to add too.
Now, I do think, especially with them having this taxpayer mid-level available, they really like the idea of having that depth. Derek Lively II is a heck of a young big. Unfortunately, he has had durability issues for the first couple of years of his career. Having that as a tag team alongside AD is that was Nico Harrison's defense wins championship vision. Now you're adding Cooper Flagg, who's a heck of a young defensive prospect, in addition to being, in the eyes of Jason Kidd, a potential Grant Hill type of point forward. There's not like the noise around the Mavericks has not, I'm not going to say been silenced, but been quieted. This Kyrie situation had a chance to be messy. It's not. That's great news for the Mavericks as they're bringing in this generational talent that they fell ass backwards into being able to draft number 1 overall.
Well, and it's also worth pointing out that Sean Sweeney's left to go be with the San Antonio Spurs. God Shammgod likely is on his way off Jason Kidd's staff.
Sean Sweeney said it a little fast, just to be Sean Sweeney, their lead assistant.
Right. And listen, that the coaching staff stuff's not great.
Well, hold on. We talked too fast over that. Sean Sweeney, lead assistant, is leaving to go be Mitch Johnson's
associate head coach down in San Antonio. And look, that's a situation where the Mavericks didn't put up, frankly, enough of a fight to try to keep a guy who's been Jason Kidd's right-hand man at every single stop of Jay Kidd's head coaching career. The guy who has been coordinating both the offense and the defense for the Mavericks. The guy who, twice was able to construct quality defenses around Luka Doncic, which, obviously there's some challenges that come along with that. And Sweeney's going to be a head coach. My understanding is the Knicks have even sniffed around there. I don't think that he's going to merge as a candidate there, but
Well, just to be expedient here, the lead assistant left. His secondary assistant, Jared Dudley, is reportedly leaving to join the Cavs, and the development assistant, God Shamgod, is reportedly considering leaving as well. I don't know if that's a done deal.
Yeah, likely will end up with the Orlando Magic. And in the case of Sweeney, the Mavericks didn't make it a tough decision because he got a title promotion, he got a longer deal, and he got significantly more money. So
they've had 3 assistant coaches leave, and Jason Kidd had some interest, maybe more than some, in the Knicks job.
Yeah,
so,
and the Knicks still don't have a coach, and Jason Kidd still didn't have a contract extension. Yeah. So roster-wise, I think they've had a really good week. Hell, a really good month and change going back to the lottery. Coach and staff-wise, they've got some stuff to figure out.
Yeah. Okay, there was also a deal on Tuesday involving the Wizards and the Pelicans. Most significantly, Jordan Poole, still riding high on that max contract that he got from the Warriors, traded to New Orleans. CJ McCollum, former podcast guest, who veteran, obviously has a shorter contract than Poole, goes to Washington. Real quick, from Washington's standpoint, they, by doing this, have potentially given themselves well, let me just tell you what the whole deal. Jordan Poole, Sadiq Bey, and the number 40 pick, mid to early second round, to New Orleans for CJ McCollum, Kelly Olynyk, and a future second round pick. But this move puts into the Wizards in position to have up to $100 million in salary cap space. I don't think the team's ever had $100 million in salary cap space for the summer of 26. I'm not sure what they're going to do with it. They could do 50 different things between now and then.
Well, and they also have the reason they have that kind of money in expiring contracts, so they can be aggressive or opportunistic leading up to the deadline too.
They have the number 6 pick in this draft, and maybe they have a good idea of who they're taking with the 6th pick, and they made this deal to better position their team for that. It does open up, since Jordan Poole is a high usage player, it does open up some time for their young guards like Bob Carrington, Bilal Coulibaly, and Keyshawn George. Now,
does it? Because I think CJ McCollum wants to play it. Probably Marcus Smart does too.
Well, we'll see. So really what happened was, a year ago, the Wizards were on pace to be the worst team point differential wise in NBA history.
Yeah.
Just getting absolutely eviscerated and blown out every single night. And they have made 3 trades since that time to acquire Marcus Smart, Chris Middleton, and now CJ McCollum, all known for their leadership and character. And Middleton picked up his $33 million player option this week, which was not a surprise. He's one of those expiring contracts to keep an eye on. But seems like the Wizards, I would like to get some more veterans in there to maybe inspire some higher competition level. But okay, McMahon, you were talking about the Pelicans.
I was. I'm much more interested in the Wizards. I'm much more interested in the Wizards side of this deal, honestly, just because of what you laid out with the cap space and and again, you can look at the free agency list next year and say, okay, what are they doing this? The cap space can also be very, very useful in the trade market. They've got a decent collection of young players. They'll add to that with the number 6 pick. They'll add to that, I assume, with what will be another lottery pick next year. But you're at least starting to see the potential for this rebuilding thing to enter into a phase 2 for 26-27. And honestly, the Pelicans side of it, I don't know, man. I'm not that intrigued by it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think for New Orleans, I don't mind it for them. Like, that is not a free agency destination. And with DeJounte Murray out for likely a big chunk of the season, if not all of it, they needed a point guard. Jordan Poole had pretty good stretches of play for Washington last year. I do think he's
the point guard.
Well, he played point guard for them. Well, he played point guard for stretch for them last year, and I thought he did fine with it. Now, again, I'm not I'm not trying to say the Pelicans are going to be lighting the world on fire, but they got a second round pick. They got Sadiq Bey, who was a guy who had offers, well into the mid to high teens before he tore his ACL on an extension, and he signed a very favorable deal. He's making $6 million the next couple of years. He's a guy that could potentially turn around if he looks like anything like he was before the injury, and could either flip him in a deal or have him there long term. And I think turning CJ McCollum and Kelly Olynyk, two expiring contracts, but two guys that did not have any value really anywhere,
Yeah.
into a guy in Jordan Poole, who's a talented young player, and Bey, who's a good flyer. Like, I think that's fine business for them, and they get a decent second out of it. Like,
I
think
don't
it's
hate it.
fine.
I just think that it's going to be really, really tough for the Pelicans to. I mean, we talked about Portland really having an uphill climb to a play-in spot. I think the Pelicans are in that same type of territory.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just also think this deal makes some sense for where their team is at. Like, at least Jordan Poole has a chance to grow with some of these younger guys they have on the team if it's a fit. Whereas,
Right.
CJ was not
Yeah.
anything for them at this point. So I get it. But yeah, look, Washington has been sort of treading water for a couple of years, obviously, as they go through this rebuild. And, they're probably going to have a pretty rough record year again this year. We'll see who they draft. Certainly seems like there's at least some possibility that Ace Bailey winds up there, who, if he does, he's going to be a guy that's going to need time. And, they're slowly adding a lot of interesting, long, athletic players. And they do have now an absolute ton of salary cap space. I mean, there's currently one guaranteed contract on their books for next year, and then they're going to pick up options at guys like Alex Sarr and Koulibaly and Carrington and stuff. But they've got $13 million that's guaranteed on their books for 2026, 27 at the moment, and that's it. So it's going to be interesting to see what directions they go in and if they can start to turn this thing in a different direction.
All right, welcome back to Hoop Collective. A couple of things. Remember, July 12th, Saturday night in Vegas, first Saturday night of Summer League at Brad Garrett's Comedy Club at the MGM Grand, our third annual Hoop Collective live show. You can get tickets at hooplive.eventbrite.com. All kinds of enjoyment there. We've got the Hoop Collective Draft Special. I don't even know what the technical name of it is. That's just what I'm going to call it, with the numbers on the board, folks. Maybe it's like a crossover. It's on YouTube during the first night of the draft. And afterwards, we'll have a podcast as our traditional thing that we'll post on Thursday morning, a little bit out of our rotation, but new Hoop Collective pod with McMahon and Bontemps on Thursday morning. I don't like to promote
Should be a
stuff,
busy night. Should be a lot to talk about.
Thanks for all of your support and your listening. And thank you to Jonathan Gavoni for giving us his insight on the draft. And all right, that's all I'm going to say. Talk to you guys later.
Adios, amigos.